This is Lesson 26 for the search for peace and political stability. So the question is, what obstacles to lasting peace did European leaders face? College Board Topic 8.4, the Versailles Conference and the Peace Settlement. Explain how and why the settlement of World War I failed to effectively resolve the political, economic, and diplomatic challenges of the early 20th century. The conflicting goals of the peace negotiators in Paris pitted diplomatic idealism against the desire to punish Germany, producing a settlement that satisfied few. The Versailles Settlement, particularly its provisions on the assignment of guilt and reparations for the war, hindered the German Weimar Republic's ability to establish a stable and legitimate political and economic system. The places, Europe and the United States, particularly Germany, France, England, from 1919 to about 1929. Key people of the search for peace and political stability. Of course, you've got John Maynard Keynes, Gustav Stresemann, Raymond Poincaré, Aristide Briand, Frank B. Kellogg, and Adolph Hitler. Key concepts in the search for peace and political stability: the Weimar Republic, the Ruhr Valley, the Dawes Plan, the Beer Hall Putsch, hyperinflation, and the Kellogg-Briand Pact. Intro. The Treaty of Versailles was, as we have seen, extremely flawed. The nations involved had to make it operate in the midst of three challenges. Number one, intellectual crisis. Number two, halting economic growth. And number three, political turmoil. Each country had its own baggage. Germany hated the treaty. France was fearful and isolated. Britain was undependable. And the U.S. ignored European issues. Eastern Europe was unstable, and the Soviet Union's future was in limbo. The economic situation was weak and complex. There were massive war debts. Normal patterns of trade were in chaos. From 1925 to 1929, it looked like stability might be reached in spite of everything. And then the world economy collapsed. Germany and the Western powers. Germany had the potential to be the strongest country in Europe. In Germany, there was great resentment of the Treaty of Versailles. They wanted that treaty renegotiated as soon as possible. Britain and France were in sharp disagreement over what should be done about Germany's hatred of the treaty. France was for strict implementation of the treaty. France had huge amounts of war debt itself, and they needed that war reparations money. They wanted that massive burden holding Germany down for their own security. Britain was for revising the Treaty of Versailles. Germany had been Britain's second largest export market. Britain needed that strong trading partner again. Economist John Maynard Keynes denounced the Treaty of Versailles. He wrote The Economic Consequences of Peace in 1919. And in that book, he argued that the treaty encouraged Bolshevism by impoverishing Germany. He created lots of sympathy for Germany in England and in the U.S. with this book. Britain actually feared French expansionist ambitions. The French had the largest army in Europe. They formed an alliance with the Soviet Union, and they had signed a mutual defense pact with Poland. An Allied commission had been set up to determine Germany's war reparations obligations and schedule. There was a total of 132 billion gold marks owed, and that's about $33 billion. The first payment of 2.5 billion marks was due in 1921, and the Weimar government managed to make that first payment. But in 1922, Germany couldn't do it. There was high inflation, and there had been disruptive political assassinations. The Weimar government demanded a 3-year moratorium on the payments. Britain was in support of the moratorium, but France was completely against it. They felt that the fate of the entire peace settlement depended upon holding Germany's feet to the fire. In January 1923, French and Belgian troops moved in to occupy the highly populated, highly urbanized, highly industrialized Ruhr Valley of Germany. This was Germany's industrial center. And the Weimar government ordered the steel and coal workers in that area to go on strike against those occupational forces. The French sealed off the whole area, letting only enough food in to prevent starvation. And they also used colonial troops from North and West Africa to further agitate German prejudice and racism. So in 1925, you have a contest of wills between the French government and the Weimar government of Germany. France can't collect war payments from striking workers, but striking workers aren't making any money to live on. Germany had tried to help striking workers and make the payments by printing huge amounts of paper money. And the result was unprecedented hyperinflation. Although you might ask the question, could they have anticipated this? And of course they could have. They very well may have done this deliberately. In other words, the message was, if you're going to make us pay all this money, we're going to make sure that money is worth much, much less. Ordinary Germans suffered greatly from the hyperinflation. Their money was literally not worth the paper it was printed on. People's entire savings were wiped out by this total devaluation. Germans were extremely angry and looking for people to blame, whether it was Western governments, their own government, big business, the Jews, the workers, the communists. And the situation was ripe for Hitler's Nazi party to exploit. Finally, in August, Germany's Gustav Stresemann and France's Raymond Poincaré worked out an agreement to re-examine Germany's ability to pay the war reparations. Prime Minister Raymond Poincaré was facing unpopularity even in France for the cost of occupying the Ruhr Valley. New, more moderate leaders were coming in on all sides of the issue. Britain and the U.S. were eager to help with this re-examination, and it looked like things were going to improve for everyone. Hope in foreign affairs. In 1924, the Dawes Plan was accepted by all sides. Germany's payments were reduced. Payment amounts were linked to Germany's economic output. Germany received large loans from the U.S. to be used for economic recovery and war reparations. In other words, Germany got loans from the U.S. so that they could pay war reparations to France and Britain, so that France and Britain could pay their war debts back to the U.S. So the U.S. was loaning out money to facilitate payments to itself. And thus you had this complex and very risky circular flow of money. And this did indeed work for a while and did facilitate some recovery. The Dawes Plan led to more hopeful diplomatic developments. In 1925, Germany and France agreed to a common border in the Pact of Locarno. Germany refused to settle borders with Poland or Czechoslovakia. Gustav Stresemann did, however, agree to solving disputes with these countries, quote, peacefully. In 1926, Germany was finally admitted into the League of Nations, and this helped to facilitate the Kellogg-Briand Pact. This pact, which 15 countries signed, renounced war as an instrument of international policy. In this pact, all 15 members agreed to resolve disputes peacefully. However, none of these agreements succeeded in averting World War II. Hope in democratic government. Democracy in Weimar Republic Germany had a rocky start, and Communist Party members entered some provincial governments for a while. And Hitler attempted his Beer Hall Putsch in 1923. He attempted to take over the Bavarian government from the city of Munich. Putsch is the German word for a coup d'etat. And for this action, Hitler spent 9 months in prison. He was actually sentenced to 5 years. In the late 1920s, it looked like the Weimar Republic might stabilize. There were regular elections, people supported democracy, business supported parliamentary government, relations with Western powers improved, and they even issued a new currency. German fringe political groups like the Nazis struggled to gain traction in improving economic conditions. When economic times are good, people are significantly less interested in groups with extreme views. But the Nazi Party attracted certain types of people, such as anti-Semites, ultra-nationalists, disgruntled war veterans. The highly active Communist Party competed against the Social Democrats for the loyalty of the working class. They were directed from Moscow, and they accused the Social Democrats of betraying the revolution by taking the gradualist, non-revolutionary track. Most workers supported the Social Democrats. France accomplished the rebuilding of its northeastern region. This was done by running huge fiscal deficits. The result of that was also massive inflation. The moderate French government managed to get the franc to stabilize at about 1/5 of its pre-war value. In France also, communists and socialists competed vigorously for the loyalty of the working class. Great Britain struggled with unemployment throughout the 1920s, hovering around 12%. And the British government fought the unemployment with aggressive welfare programs, unemployment relief, subsidized housing, medical aid, and pensions. These measures had decent results. The standard of living did not collapse, class tensions were eased, and the state was set up for the welfare state it would become after World War II. British politics saw a shift from classical liberalism to modern liberalism. The older Liberal Party had stood for such ideas as competitive capitalism, limited government, individual responsibility. The newer Labour Party stood for championing the working class, greater social equality, and moderate revisionist socialism. The Labour Party actually replaced the Liberal Party as the main opposition to the Conservatives. In 1924, and from 1929 to 1931, a Labour Party Prime Minister, Ramsay MacDonald, governed the country. In 1922, even the Conservatives of Britain agreed to finally grant the Republic of Ireland complete independence.